Hey everyone, my name is Colin Goldberg and welcome to the Techpressionist Salon number 62. Today is Wednesday, February 1st, 2023, and this evening's topic is Art Pirates. So I'm just going to really quickly share my screen here. So this piece of artwork, Art Pirates, fittingly enough, was created using Midjourney, pirating the artwork from everyone on the internet and coming up with this image. And the prompt that was used to create the image was Techpressionist Art Pirates. So that's what Midjourney thinks a Techpressionist art pirate looks like.
Wow.
But the topic was originally just pirates, and I think Renata suggested, I think Tommy might have came up with pirates, and then Renata suggested that we add on art to make it art pirates. But anything that anyone wants to share related to this idea, or anything else that's going on in the studios. I'd rather have the time be spent while we're recording of people showing and sharing their work than, definitely discourse is also, certainly encouraged. So without further ado, I'm going to kick us off with our first artist who will be presenting, and that is Zachary Zaitsev. So just a quick intro. I met Zach many moons ago when I was through Steve Miller, when I was primarily doing a lot of client work, and I've gotten to know him as an artist as well. At that time, I was working with him doing a website for a restaurant that he owned in New York that was actually pretty close to where I used to live in New York back in the day. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Zach, and Zach, you're welcome to share your screen at any time if you wish.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Zach Zaitsev. I am a transplant from originally from New York, but live in Louisiana, just north of New Orleans. And I've been making art for making and selling art close to 30 years. And I use as many different kinds of mediums as possible.
Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, and for everyone who isn't sharing, if you could just mute yourselves, that'd be appreciated.
All right.
Thanks.
No
Sorry,
worries.
Zach.
So, I mean, for example, now I'm making whirly gigs, but I consider myself a painter, and I have something to share that I really haven't shown anybody except for Colin. It's a short video that I did, and let me just sort of present it, and then I can explain it. But I'd like to definitely hear people's feedback on it. So how do I? Where's the share?
So on the bottom of the Zoom window, there should be a green share screen button.
Oh, right there. Okay,
and
good.
when that pops up, it'll ask you what you want to share, what screen you want to share, and then you can just click the share button. There you go.
Okay, and
Now, is there there's audio in this, right?
there's audio in it, and the audio for me is really important.
Okay, when you clicked share, there's a checkbox that says share device audio. I don't know if you checked that, but if you didn't, you might want to stop the share and then reshare, and then make sure that box is checked before you click the last share thing, because you need that on.
All right, hold on. So go back. So I go to this, and
So there should be a little checkbox after you hit share screen. There you go.
Do I do optimize video for video clip as well?
Nah, I would skip that one.
Okay. All right, got it. All right, y'all can see the black screen?
Yep. All right. And what's the title of that piece, Zach?
It's Listen to the Crows in the Fire. So just a little bit of a background. Years ago, this was when I was living in upstate New York. I saw a lot of flags hanging out right by the entranceways to people's homes. It was a very common image, especially in the Northeast. You don't see it all that much down here in Louisiana. And I was just thinking about the symbolism for that. It's a very welcoming image. And so I just started to play with it as far as art. Right around that same time, I took a trip down to the Smithsonian, and you could see some of the battle flags that had been in wars and had been torn apart. It's an object that has been sort of through a great ordeal, like we all do. The art that I've made with the flag, I don't consider itself political in any way. It's more dealing with the human condition and sort of the trials and tribulations that we all go through in life, and that a lot of times we can be destroyed, damaged in a way, but we all deserve protection. And so the flag that I had made for that, I studying the flag. I learned that, over 100 years ago, flags were homemade, and you could use any sort of hue of red, white, and blue that you wanted, any sort of star configuration that you wanted. And it was a way for someone to sort of express their individuality, and at the same time saying, unity, being with a larger group. And I like that too. I like that symbolism. And the flag that was in the video had a US star configuration, and that was actually patented over 100 years ago. I like the symbolism of that as well. And I was playing on sort of, not only the video, but it being sort of like an action art piece. And I thought that behind the flag, as the flag was burning, you sort of see, sort of a beautiful field with a road. There are a lot of questions that can be asked, as far as our lives and going down the different roads that we all go on.
Cool. So does anyone have any questions for Zach? Or I think, the way that this salon is looking, we could probably do a little bit of conversation, with each artist after they present. When Zach first showed me this piece, I thought, that it probably could fit within the current theme, in that, the flag itself is a piece of art that he's appropriated. And I think that it's interesting too, in terms of that configuration. That's something that was pre-existing. But does anyone have any thoughts or questions for Zach?
Well, it's kind of hard to say that this is apolitical, because, the nation is literally on fire. States that are suffering from climate catastrophes, political discourse is especially not civil and increasingly less based on facts. So there is a movement within Congress itself, burn it down type of attitude of the family annihilator. If I can't have it, nobody can, So how do you broach this obvious symbolism that's staring at us, and we're living it every day, and your desire to be apolitical with it?
I almost don't want to go there with it. I don't know. Like when I first thought about it and sort of executed, my battle flags and this video, I was thinking more of, I think just the individual, regardless of country and where you live. it's everybody is obviously everyone is different, and everybody has, you know, their problems more so than others. That's as far as I went, as far as my thought, or my conscious thought of when I executed this piece.
Right. Well,
I
you
mean,
live in Louisiana, you know.
That's a
I'm in
different.
South Carolina, so I'm just calling a spade a spade.
I hear you.
I love it.
But I recognize that. I definitely do. And you know, you can read into it and really any way you want to. That's sort of the beauty of art, is that, you know, you're never wrong. You know, it's one's opinion, but I can just tell you that that's what I was, you know, sort of the themes that I was thinking about were resilience. You know, that's a huge theme with my flag work.
Okay, so maybe one way you could really make that point of resilience is to reverse the film sequence, reverse it, and have the flag reconstitute itself. Sort of like a phoenix, you know, from the ashes, that type of thing.
But I sort of, you know, the way I saw it was the flag comes down, and what's it overlooking? It's overlooking something beautiful. Like what's behind it, what's in it, what's in the flag. It's a beautiful field with a road. That's what I was sort of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So it could go either way. I mean, I take your point. I think, you know, as far as I could try that.
Yeah, show some people. You know, faces kind of get the point too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
For me, I would say that I feel like it's perhaps less political than it's about the whole country as a whole. And I tend to see political as being one side or the other. And I think that putting myself in a conservative point of view, I think they also would feel that the country's burning down for different reasons. And so it feels to me, I mean, I can understand not calling it political, but it feels like a sign of the times, perhaps, that reflects on, you know, just the sign of the times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, another thing I thought that was interesting when I was researching the flag is that because once I went down to my town hall, and there was an entire basket of like old flags, and they retire them. The way you retire a flag is you burn it, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I like the way the Tibetans retire their flags. They put them on the top of mountains and let them decay,
Right.
with the words that are being carried off into the wind. It's
Right.
letting the, you know, a little more holistic or something.
Yeah.
All right. So unless anyone has any other questions or comments for Zach, I guess we can move on. Malavika, do you have some work you'd like to share?
Yeah, but I think Michael wants to say something. Michael, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael. I think you're muted.
Okay, yeah, my bad. I think context is everything sometimes. I guess I think Verneda brought up a very interesting point. Just in general, what happens if your intention is this thing, and you know a big swath of folks interpret your work as something completely different, or they run with your work in a way that you don't feel like that's what you were trying to represent. And I think that's the vulnerability, I think. And I think, Zach, you mentioned that as well. It's like you can interpret it how you like, but I think sometimes things take on a life of themselves. And I guess my initial interpretation was more along the lines of, I think, maybe how Verneda was seeing things as well. And so I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I thought it was interesting, but the whole flag burning thing can really kind of separate people depending on how you look at it. And again, context, I think, is very, very important. And as it relates to art pirates, for me, I just think oftentimes as artists, if we're doing things that we feel are important, that puts us on the fringe. And to me, that's not the stealing piracy part, but the pirates fighting the big colonial entrenched powers. So if you look at it from that standpoint, I think as artists, we oftentimes take on the prevailing mindset and try to bring in viewpoints that are maybe on the outskirts of what's acceptable or what people are willing to tolerate. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in really quickly. So I think that taking the flag on is the ultimate piracy. It's a symbol that's a heavy symbol, and people have taken it to mean different things. And it was co-opted at one point by a certain part of our society. And one of the great joys in my neighborhood, when the election was declared, the last presidential election, people brought out their American flags. And of course, unfortunately, my childhood flag only has 48 stars. I guess I was supposed to burn it. I'm dating myself, with apologies to Colin, who has ties to one of those other states that came in later. And my neighborhood had a spontaneous block party and closed off the street, and people were dancing in the streets. And I felt that it was a real pirating of the flag, if I can even say that, the kind of take back the flag, which had come to mean something else. And then someone else will come along and make it mean something else. But in terms of the topic of piracy, I think the flag is like really ripe for that. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think Marlo had her hand up for a minute. Marlo, you have something to say?
Well, you all had just discussed it. Zach, your presentation I had conflicting feelings, the flag being such an icon, and in my lifespan, seeing it, the personal is political, all sorts of discussions started arising. And so I've just been enjoying what you've said and what everyone has shared. I have nothing more to add to it. Thank you, though, Renata.
Thank you.
I would just add that right now I'm looking at the flag that draped my father's coffin. They fold the flag and they give it to the family. I'm looking at the flag that draped his coffin. He was a Marine. And it's a big part of my family legacy, the flag is.
Anyone else? All right. All right. Well, thanks everyone for lively discussion. I think that work that inspires discussion. It's really positive. Regardless of what the discussion is, I feel like the discourse aspect of this format is what makes it interesting. I feel like a lot of other sort of group-oriented things on the internet are like a presenter comes up and then another presenter comes up and then another presenter comes up and then it's over. So I think through the last couple of years, seeing familiar faces on here and getting to know various artists all around the world and their bodies of work and their personalities and everything else. To me, that's a real big part of what Techspressionism is all about. And it's really been pretty amazing, I think, to see to see this group and community kind of like grow and come together. We just added a new artist. I haven't added her to the artist index yet, but I'm really excited to have her as part of the community. She's a poet, actually, and her name is Sasha Stiles. She just DM'd me back because I had seen her work on Instagram, but I ordered her book. It's called Technology, and it's all, work revolving around technology. And I believe she's, not sure if she's minted the poems as NFTs, but she's also, pretty actively involved in the NFT space. And if you're interested in poetry, yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. So without further ado, I would like to move along to Malavika. If you'd like to introduce yourself and let everyone know where you're zooming in from, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi, I'm Malavika Mandalandru from India, and right now it is 4:28 morning, and I don't know whether it will fit to the today's topic or not, but I thought sometime knowingly or unknowingly we use a lot of images directly from the net, and even the time when I've made this, I have one work where I have used the images from the net, and it was, I think, 2012. That time, the reason of developing this is one of the, what I should say, one of the very expensive building came up here. Its name is Antalya. And the reason of taking that was that what is the necessity? Because I was working more on desires, more on in transit. So I'll just share the screen. So. Okay, now. Am I audible? Hello?
I could hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I didn't see your screen being shared. Oh, did you just disappear?
Is showing shared?
Oh.
Because it is not showing at my place the correct screen what I want to share. Again, same problem I'm facing. Is it visible? One building?
No, I'm not seeing the screen.
Can I do little later so that I can share the proper one?
Sure.
Because
yeah, absolutely.
I'm taking unnecessarily time, not showing
yeah,
it properly.
no worries. Well, Steve, if you're interested in sharing some of your book work that as it relates to the topic of art pirates, when I first was speaking with you earlier, I was thinking about those books, and you actually introduced me to Richard Prince's work, which I think has some sort of relationship to that body of work in terms of the appropriation idea. So if you're interested in sharing and talking a little bit about that, that would be I think really relevant to the topic.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I don't know if my own work is going to be part of this discussion, but yeah, we used to call this appropriation, right? There was this idea with appropriation, and the concept that came out of like pictures culture and Douglas Crimp writings that he had done in I believe the 80s. And the idea was there were so many images out there that there was no need to create new images. And with the proliferation of mass imagery, there was this notion that they could not all have meaning, and that the meaning became kind of null and void, and you could rescue those images, put them in a new context by appropriating an image and create a new discourse on meaning and imagery. And examples of this would be someone like Cindy Sherman, who would take Hollywood roles of posing and take those kinds of images that you would have around the creation of a movie, for example, those sort of scene images. They'd have professional photographers come on set and do these sort of photographs. And she kind of reinvented and embedded those images with roles about the roles of women in culture and feminism, and bringing that content to these images that were kind of previously used. Other people in the movement, Jack Goldstein, Barbara Kruger, who just had a huge installation at MoMA. So this idea of appropriation was that you can take something, recontextualize it, and give it new meaning. Now, I was just in listening to a podcast today. I don't know if any of you guys know Jerry Gagosian, who has a podcast called Art Smack, and she was talking about AI today and a major lawsuit. So, where art appropriation was this kind of one-time thing on an individual basis of unique artists, this whole AI discussion that's coming in right now is like, there's artists that are suing some of the platforms for taking their work and including it into part of the algorithms for the art that some of these machines are appropriating or stealing or really pirating on the high seas and acting like swashbucklers without any responsibility towards the whole idea about copyright and intellectual property. So, what Richard Prince was, obviously, as Colin was saying, he's one of the first people in this, prominent appropriation. Then I think a lot of them, just everyone know the Instagram pieces that Richard did. So originally started out in Time magazine, ripping out, the ads and stuff, where he was working as a photo editor, and then just rephotographing those and then presenting out his own work. Famous for doing that with the Marlboro Man, taking the Marlboro ads, removing the text and presenting those as his work. And he was sued he's been sued a lot of times, as has Jeff Koons, right? These are two major appropriators that are taking other people's imagery. But what's interesting right now for me is that even in the time of, let's say, Richard Prince and Jeff Koons, there was a potential structure to litigate this kind of theft, right? And it's really hard to win these cases. And with AI now, how do you possibly, with Instagram, where Meta supposedly owns all of the Instagram images, your work, if you put it on Facebook, you no longer own that work. So we've got this individual artist piracy of appropriation that's become mass corporate piracy with AI. And again, I don't know where the hell any of this is going to go, but when you introduced the pirate thing, that's the first thing I thought about. And we can have a discussion about that if we haven't had already online. And
Would you want to share your screen and pull up your site and show some of those books that were screen printed on top of other content? When I first was thinking about you and your body of work, those ones came to mind as relevant.
Well, Steve, Steve, I have a question, Steve. You stated
Sure.
that there's that Facebook appropriates the artwork that we publish on their platforms. Do you have like a reference for that?
Well, I think you sign something when you do the when you sign the agreement to be on those platforms, you basically sign away your rights to your product. And I think that's the part that's incredibly disturbing, right? And they claim that they own your imagery, and that is really, really, really disturbing. So I think that's the issue with this media. So if one could argue if they're scraping all of Instagram, then Instagram owns this this imagery that you've created. So it's just getting really, really, really super complicated.
Hey Steve, I could share off of mine. I was thinking even like something like that Gold Rasta book.
Yeah, I mean, is this coming up now?
So is it are you saying it's dangerous or risky to post your art on Instagram?
Well, we all know that the Instagram, read the Instagram contract. Yeah, they you give up ownership of your work.
Of your work or that image?
Of anything you post online on those platforms.
So like if you're an artist, you shouldn't be posting anything on Instagram.
Well, that's that's a lot of people have taken that position. So, I think that's a whole, the idea about ownership and even if somebody rips you off, are you going to like litigate? I mean, this is happening all the time. Richard was sued for taking Instagram images and reposting them. He changed the legal parameters are, is it a change in medium? Is it ironic? Is it commentary? Those are some of the criteria for fair use. And one could argue, he was arguing he takes a image from a cell phone and he manipulates it and changes the text. He has it printed, ink on canvas. So one could argue pigment on canvas is a painting and transforms it into a painting. And that was, the argument he was using. I don't remember whether he won or lost that case. But
Jeff Koons lost that case.
Well, he's won and lost different cases. A friend of mine sued him, and I'm going to keep this person's name because they don't want to talk about, but they actually lost because part of it is the percentage of the image used. That's one of the criteria. Again, this is done by judges that don't know anything about art, but because this person's art was part of a collage and the percentage of the space on the painting didn't represent enough of her to claim ownership of the whole image.
That's why Rauschenberg would win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really important right now to understand what the legal arguments are about fair use value. That gets litigated in courts. I'm just giving you some of the parameters around what these issues are. But these issues are quaint when you start to get into the level of corporate theft on a large scale, right? I mean, it's just, yeah, you can sue on this individual level, but now that you get to the AI conversation, and AI bots are now being sued by a group of artists. That's what this Art Smack podcast was about today with Jerry Gagosian, but I think we're in a whole new world about is there even a legal structure that could litigate the complexity of scraping images by AI bots? I mean, these are some of the issues involved in this whole pirate issue. So
Can you guys see the screen I'm sharing with the
Yeah.
book? So Steve,
No.
do you want to just speak briefly about this piece in particular and like the thinking behind it?
okay, is the book up now?
No,
Yeah, I don't know if can you guys see it?
No, I
Am I?
don't think so.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, you know what? Let me actually,
It was there.
I didn't start sharing. Let's see. Can you guys see it now?
yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. So let me go back to the
So
the
this is a
beginning.
very interesting conversation about appropriation. So this is a book that Patrick Carrier. So Richard Prince, um, uh, he took images from this book and he massively blew them up on you might just stop here for 1 second and then we keep going. He massively blew them up and then put them on paintings, which he called the Rasta paintings. And this artist, Patrick Carrier, sued Richard. He won the first round, he lost the second round. But I've been doing this for a while as well, and what happened was in this instance, the person that was doing making these silver gel photos, so you can keep scrolling now, but you can see I take ownership of the book, and they were printed. These are now me taking my images and painting on top of the images of the book. And I used the book because it had something to do with marginal cultures being pushed farther away by the advent of technology and civilization. And the person that did develop the photographs and printed them came to my studio because he's shooting a book about artists of the Hamptons. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm just taking this book," and it was part of another series that I was doing about recycling, again, what we talked about in the appropriate. And actually I had maybe in the back of the book, if it's even photographed, there'll be the image of the recycling. But so I basically silk screened on every single page of the book. And I had actually written, I think that was one image that Richard used, that guy with the Rasta hair. And there's one with a guy and a donkey. I don't know if that was the one that he used a lot, that was in the paintings that he showed at Gagosian. The paintings at Gagosian sold for, several $100,000. The artist felt ripped off. But in this case, what Richard did was take the book, cut out the images, slather them with paint on the back, and then push them on top to larger collages in another composition. I had written Patrick Carrier asking him for permission, and he had said he didn't reply. And part of this, suing is you can sue for like the profit of the book. In case of the double helix, I got permission from James Watson. I did start to get permission from people, but I was sued as well by other authors for the same reason that Richard was sued. In this case, I say I'm the author, Steve Miller. Now we can see here James Watson's signature. So I actually got his approval to do it. In the case of the Carrier book, what happened is that because this is being recorded, I'm not going to reveal my conversations with Patrick, but actually there was no reason to sue me because I don't make any money and the books sell for nothing. So you're not going to get into a legal suit to sue me for, the few $100s that I make on these books. So I sort of fell under the radar of litigation. And see if I did get sued for see if the Forest book is there. Let's see. Yes, Rasta. Yeah, no, is there, what's the other drop down, Colin? Thanks for doing this for me, by the way. Edition books. Okay, so Favela Defenders, I was sued for this one. And it was on a website at Harper's Books online. So I take the book, it was called, I guess it was called Another, we'll see it when we flip the page open. Is there a title page on this? I can't remember. It was called something else. And I made the title Favela Defenders. I put my name on it. Then I silk screened on every single page of the book images of these wires. And this guy did sue me. I just, I pulled it from the bookstore, and I tried to engage him in a dialogue. We did speak. I was trying to explain what I was doing. And my lawyer and other people said there's no way that people would, with 10 books, my signing them, think that this was this other person's work. But at any rate, I withdrew it from it's online. You could still see it's on my website, but I withdrew it from the store in order to just avoid litigation, because what the hell? I haven't sold one of these books, right? It's an edition of 9 examples. And what I did was I contributed to his GoFund campaign, and in return for doing that, I got a signed book of the original copy of this. I think it was called Forest Defenders was the original title of the book. And these are wires from the favela in Brazil. And that's sort of one of the images from my practice, and the ideas that these chaotic wires represent this, this restrained need for resources, which has to do with the deforestation of the Amazon and the rise of the favela culture in Brazil, where people that are really poor are just doing what they need to do to survive. And one of the things they're doing is ripping off the electricity. So recycling a book is the last page here, the recycle image at all. See if I have that. Okay, I don't have that. So sometimes I have this logo that says art, that's the recycle logo, and I'm recycling something. So I try to make it really clear, the intention. But this issue about appropriation, whether you're stealing, in my case, because I don't really make enough money on this stuff, it doesn't really matter. I'm not worth suing. But I now, with the AI and the corporate level of theft, I think we could have a lively conversation.
All right, thank you, Steve. I'm going to open up the floor for some discourse. So people just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if you'd like.
I have a question for Steve. So Steve, if I were to take a photo of your artwork and put it on my Instagram, and I don't have Instagram, would you theoretically lose ownership rights in that, even if you didn't post it yourself?
Well, I don't, if you post on Instagram, you don't own it anyway. Someone else has taken my work and posted it on Instagram. I would have never seen it, but somebody pointed out to me. They said, "Is this your work?" And they presented it as their work. And it was an X-ray of a snake that I had done, a python. And all I did was write them and say, "Hey, really, thanks for showing my work and supporting it." I said, "Would you kindly give me photo credit?" And she decided to do that, to tag it, and that's all I cared about. I mean, I know that when I put something on Instagram, it's like using Gmail or anything else. Google has every single email you've ever written stored somewhere, and you make you take the risk that it's better to get eyeballs on the work and have people looking at what I'm doing. In my case, I made that decision rather than worry about whether Instagram is going to do something with my work or not. But yeah, go ahead.
I have here the Instagram copyright statement. And what it says is, "We do not claim ownership of your content, but you grant us a license to use it. Nothing is changing about your rights in your content. We do not claim ownership of your content that you post on or through the service, and you are free to share your content with anyone else wherever you want. However, we need certain legal permissions from you, known as license, to provide the service. When you share, post, or upload content that is covered by intellectual property rights, like photos or videos, on or in connection with our service, you hereby grant us a non-exclusive, royalty-free, transferable, sublicensable, worldwide license to host, use, distribute, modify, run, copy, publicly perform, or display, translate, and create derivative works of your content consistent with your privacy and application settings. This license will end when your content is deleted from our systems. You can delete content individually or all at once by deleting your account. And I put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
That's
Renee.
oppression.
So they don't actually own the
They don't
content,
own
but
it.
they could
They
just
can use
They
it.
do
have
whatever they want
unlimited
with
right
it.
to use it however they feel.
Yeah.
And they did state that they could make derivative works. And that is a loophole through which the AI people are jumping, the derivative work provision.
Mhm.
They didn't say that they could relicense it though. And for someone to take it off of Instagram and use it, then they would have to relicense it.
It almost sounds like they're granting themselves the Creative Commons line, which is, we'll use your work. You can make derivatives of it, but they don't mention anything about giving you credit, a tagline that this was originally your work in what Renata read. Maybe there's something later on, I don't know, but there's no mention of credit.
Yeah, I think we all should copy this stuff, print it out and read it. Go to that link and print out everything. You know?
We should copy all of their stuff and pirate all of their
Yeah.
Well, we should
Ain't
take their
on their
logo
terms
and-
of service.
Even though, I mean, I abhor the idea that they can take your work and use it any way they want. I'm not aware of many instances where they actually do that. And to me, it's not as big. I mean, emotionally, intellectually, it just feels outright wrong, ethically wrong. On the other hand, they're giving us a platform to promote ourselves and to get eyeballs in front of our work. And that's one of our jobs as artists, is to get our work out there. And there's always a compromise in that process. And while I'm not endorsing their point of view, I mean, what's the risk you take, as an artist to get your work seen in relationship to the risk of somebody ripping you off or, Instagram running an ad campaign based on your images?
That makes a lot of sense.
I agree. And I feel that the earlier point you made, Steve, about the piracy that's going on with AI and visual artists is far more serious.
No, I think I agree with you. I think the AI thing is much more pernicious. And also, how are you going to litigate, with a corporation? And, as we saw in the friend of mine, or as I talked about, the friend of mine that did sue Jeff Koons and lost, her percentage of the image, she was a commercial photographer, and the percentage of the image that they used didn't, the judge decided that it wasn't enough of the total imagery to, the Jeff was basically in charge of that whole content. So when an AI bot is scraping you and you feel your images are coming up, like say the AI bot says, make an ad campaign based on the images of Steve Miller. You would, or let's do an ad campaign based on the imagery of Steve Miller, Colin Goldberg, and Zachary Zaitsev, because these three guys are next to me on the screen. That's the only reason I'm mentioning the three of you. It's going to be really hard to litigate something like that. And I think, the only defense that we have is to figure out, how to get our work in front of an audience, and does an audience respond to what we do as artists? And these legal issues are just way beyond our ability to litigate. So in fact, I'm powerless over these AR bots. I don't have the horsepower to fund litigation, and I'm hoping that, get my work out there in front of an audience.
I think you can hold the company responsible, just like if, and maybe you can use the argument, just like if my dog went and attacked somebody, I would be responsible.
I think there's legal arguments to go after them. The question is,
Do
are
you
you
want
going?
to?
Yeah, are you going to? What's the energy and cost? What is the emotional energy and the financial, powder keg you got to have at your disposal in order to litigate? So what's the best strategy, as all of us as artists, as we're dealing with this notion of piracy, and what was formerly called appropriation? I like the piracy to the, marrying that to the AI concept, and I like the idea of appropriation with single artists' use of imagery. But what's the best way to be seen in this world, and what are the risks you take in doing so?
I mean, it makes me think about early on and throughout my time working, building websites for people, a constant sort of question was, well, how can I prevent people from stealing my work if I put it on my website?
That's from this app on my phone, and I don't know.
And there really isn't any way. Even if you can, put a something that's going to disable people from right-clicking an image and everything else. People can always screenshot an image. And my response always was like, you know what? If you're publishing it on the internet, people can take it. Bottom line, so it's that trade-off of, do you want to hold your images so close that like only the people that you select can see them? Or do you want to make them available for as many people as possible? And, that's part of the reason with Techspressionism that I decided to put a Creative Commons license right on the Techspressionism website, because you know what, like, I actually feel the opposite of the way that mentality is, in that, like, if people are taking a concept or content and propagating it, it's actually to the benefit of the people who are originating it, not the contrary. I mean, that might or might not be a popular point of view. I think the whole open source software movement is sort of based on that. And even closed source, people like Bill Gates used to say, I hope they, pirate my software, because then they're going to be using that system. And at some point, we'll have to eventually upgrade to the paid version, So anyway, just kicking that in there.
Yeah, I just saw something in the chat, and I agree. When someone put their work on Instagram and presented it as their work, I said, just give me credit. And whether the AI bot or someone does an ad campaign I sued Chanel. This is a whole nother thing. They took one of my images from a work of mine that they owned. It was in their corporate art collection, and did an ad campaign based on my imagery, and that was like 2 or 3 years worth of litigation. I ultimately lost. It's a whole long story, but
You're muted, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. Getting your work out there is a better result than not getting it out there, and taking the risk to, and like I say, like, one of Richard's argument was for one of the people that he appropriated was that person got tons of publicity out of it, and they started reselling their images because of the Richard Prince thing, and were able to monetize it. So whether you can monetize it or not, I think it's how many, what's the price of getting your work in front of as many eyeballs as possible? And that, quite frankly, is a lesson I learned from Colin.
I mean, with Richard Prince, like, was the work basically about the idea of ownership. I mean, you know, it was about the idea of ownership and intellectual property as its basis, right? Like, why else would someone take a picture of the Marlboro Man ad and, you know, present it, recontextualize it as their work? You know, and, you know, what do you think about that as, you know, in terms of it, you know, was he basically just, he's, you know, being a provocateur, right? To see, well, if I do this blatant theft, are there going to be legal repercussions? You know what I
Well,
mean? Like, to me, that's what it was all about.
It's more than, I think that's part of it, but I think it's more complex. Richard is a cultural, sociological anthropologist, and he's gone through, you know, lots of different areas of mass culture to kind of excavate and represent. And with the Marlboro Man, I think what he was trying to say was that this is the American myth, right? It's a myth, and the myth is created through advertising, right? Also through movies, but this is a myth that everybody buys into, and this is the content and the myth of the American, you know, freedom, and, you know, all these issues that we're hearing spoken about in the current discourse. And then the female version of that myth was the nurses, the nurse paintings, and he took book covers from a lot of pulp. I guess there's a whole series of nurse books, pulp nurse, and he took those and then, you know, photographed them, then painted all over them. And I think, you know, he's trying to make, whether you agree with him or not, he's making a statement about, you know, people's roles in culture, how those roles are presented, through what filters are which they viewed, through which filters are they received. In this case, the Marlboro Man is through mass advertising. In case of the nurses, it's these sort of intimate novels and fantasy. And the nurses, the nurse, you know, theoretically, one of the aspects is of nursing is the sort of taking care of, right? The role of one might define the female role is a supportive role, and taking care of, and the nurturing role of mothering and womanhood. And you can argue with any of these concepts, but I think what he's doing is looking through different aspects of American culture and excavating, you know, what he thinks are the presentation of the role and the context of how we perceive those roles. So I think it's about content, the recontextualization, the removing of the text, then makes you see like, oh, this is really what everybody believes in, this American myth that's an actor dressed up in a cowboy suit and ad for cigarettes.
I agree with Steve. I think it plays a lot into this whole notion of implicit bias as well. You know, my wife's a doctor, a psychologist, and older male patients they don't use the word doctor with her, and she's noticed that with a lot of females, and never happens to male doctors. I don't know what Vernada's experiences were back in the day, but you know, there's just a lot of that. And I think as artists, I agree with Steve that sometimes it's important to kind of put that front and square, and show that as a mirror to our, you know, to society, to people.
Well, it is a problem. The sexism and the implicit bias is a problem. And you do have to put it in people's faces in order for them to learn. I don't know why it takes so much for some people to learn, but it does. I used to appoint myself a one-person committee to educate everybody about how to deal with me and my white coat and stethoscope. And someone once called me the N-word. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 250 pounds. And I whooped him good, honey. Yes, I did. I smacked the you know what out of him. They had to pull me off that sucker. But so alas, you know, there's all kinds of ways to educate.
Well, I think, you know, Vernada, what you're talking about, and I think what Michael is talking about as well, and what I think the artists are showing in this appropriation work, a lot of women were a part of this group, and I think they were really starting to, women were coming in, just starting. I mean, it's insane, but just starting to come in as recognized artists, because the art world was a completely male domain for hundreds of years. Yeah, there are like a few exceptions, right? One Renaissance painter, one, Impressionist painter, but for the most part, with this rise of appropriation, became this rise of understanding that role models and these things are going to be looked at and dissected on how they're presented in the culture. And now we're in a whole nother place with Black Lives Matters, the number of artists of color that have come into the marketplace, the status that these artists are achieving, the kinds of cultural commissions they're getting. Let's say the Hank Willis Thomas Commission for the Martin Luther King Memorial in Boston. So we're starting with this recognition of something that started in the 80s. It's now blossomed into a much larger movement that's more inclusive. I'm just worried, and there's nothing we can do about it, that the AI bot can just completely suppress this kind of progress that we've made in terms of making the world more inclusive. It's a slow job, but it's happening in museums, museum directors. Women are in positions of leadership, and they're getting, comparable, not always, but, high prices at auction. And I'm worried that kind of like this whole pirate thing could really put the kibosh on that.
That's a concern of mine as well. That AI especially can be pernicious.
Yeah, because I think the effort is on the far right is to dehumanize, right, the
Yes.
left, right? And
Yeah.
that dehumanization allows for, well, if this other thing is dehumanized, then it's okay to have violence. So I think the dehumanization of the other side of the equation is part of the, distressing part of the political discourse right now. But the AI pirating can really suppress those issues completely in this sort of mass absorption of scanning of all identity and turning it into a kind of corporate authority.
Did anyone see the CBS Sunday Morning segment that ran most recently about deep fakes? There was a segment about deep fakes where they showed basically completely believable video clips of people like Tom Cruise and Barack Obama and Donald Trump saying things that they weren't really saying. And the sort of antidote for that was that companies like Adobe and Microsoft are teaming up to create a badge on content that is verifiable, quote unquote. That is, they can track probably through hashes in the document. I'm not exactly sure the specifics of how it would be done, but the origins of the file, if it was created in Photoshop, I'm sure there's some metadata that's involved. So it's a really interesting and slippery slope. But as time goes on, we're all going to be starting to see images on CNN.com, on New York Times, with this little eye icon that you would click. I think it's an eye icon. That means that it's real. You know what I mean? So on the one hand, it prevents rogue, fake, deep fakes from tricking us into thinking that Obama or Trump are saying things that they never really said. But on the flip side of that, it's a couple, very large corporations determining what truth is. And certainly anything that can be used to create those badges can be hacked. Part of what I actually wanted to show was, basically my first thing that I thought of when this topic came up was, my first computer was a Commodore 64, and I can admit now that the statute of limitations is gone, that I was involved in hacking and trading pirated video games as a teenager, and a lot of what I saw that these cracking crews would make, like if you Google C64 crack intro, it's not crack the drug. You know, these are people who cracked software, and I mean, this is sort of not such great ones, but some of these sequences, you know, they were actually better than the video games. And, you know, like these crews, like to me, were creating the equivalent of graffiti on, you know, on computers in the 80s. And I feel like it's a part of underground culture that like most people don't ever see. They would never, you know, Google those things. But I look at back at that stuff with a lot of nostalgia, and I think that you know, it's a very interesting sort of subculture, and I see it, you know, now in the NFT scene as, you know, in some ways echoing into the NFT scene with people operating with handles and so on and so forth, you know, in pseudo anonymity. So anyway, a little bit of a segue
Colin,
there.
yeah, I just, you know, that's interesting because the AI thing is, you know, you mentioned like the tag, like we're never gonna know. This is something really positive for every artist that's on the screen right now. You never know, like actually, you know, if the tag is real, if the information you're getting from the bot is real, what the source is. But I think my hope is that the actual practitioners, like us artists that are making, we artists, or whatever the right vocabulary is, that are making individual works of art, it'll be clear that that's something you can trust, right? So to get to an analog painting practice, you know, you're not going to know what the AI world is, what's authentic, what's not, what's true, what's not true. But I think it's going to give a kind of authority to individual artistic practice that is actually going to be beneficial.
I think so too. You know, I think the thing that's interesting with these deep fakes is like, you know, they're pretty convincing, you know, and like a lot of still AI imagery is pretty easy to detect. You know, you sort of can see the stylistic watermarks of a Midjourney image or a DALL-E image. But with deep fakes, depending on how, you know, how sophisticated the systems are, I mean, you know, and this whole technology probably was also, you know, aided in its development through Hollywood. Like, you know, Carrie Fisher was in a Star Wars movie where she wasn't alive anymore. And she was, here's Princess Leia saying stuff that was never recorded on film, you know, and it was as convincing as can be, you know. So it's cool, and it's also sort of very frightening in some ways.
I'd like to see, when Steve was talking about the metadata, I think it was Steve or it was Colin, about how they could trace back maybe it was Colin, in the deep fake to where the original item or image came from. Why can't hopefully they do that with a digital art? Whereas there, you know, there would be metadata embedded in the file. As it is, there is metadata there already, but metadata that would identify you as the original creator of something.
They have software that can do that. It's called Digimarc, Digimarc. And you can subscribe to the Digimarc service, and they will embed a code that is uniquely yours into your images in a way that is not discernible to the naked eye. And they also have a service where you can scan the internet to see if any of the images bearing your Digimarc are out there and you didn't put them out there. So you can retrieve and identify exactly where your images are that are bearing your mark. And Digimarc is very reasonably priced too. So, you know, you might want to check that out, because everyone that subscribes to the service has their own unique identifier. So when you see that those digits inside a artwork, then you can easily trace it back to the person, their address and everything.
That sounds interesting. And of course, as Colin always points out, when you have an NFT and you burn it, you've established that it's your piece.
Right.
But that, that's not something every artist is going to do, or perhaps at some point be able to afford to do.
Right.
But certainly if it was done less expensively in the future, where you could actually place them there and they would be in the blockchain
Mm-hmm.
and belong to you, that would be another way to establish ownership of something.
Yeah, I've been using Digimark since 2003. And so far it's proven very useful. So yeah, I might want to check that out as an intermediate step.
Yes.
Mhm.
The other thing I wanted to mention, there was the article where I think it's 3 female artists have sued Stable Diffusion, or is it Dale? I forget. And there's another individual who's written a rebuttal to all of the points that have been made by the original lawsuit. The original lawsuit talks about these AI models making collages of artists' work that is scraped off the web. But this other individual argues that it's not a collage that they create, and they start talking about the first article mentions that there's this business of noise, reducing your image to noise and then going back from the noise to create another image, and somehow using that as an argument against AI. The people on the other side that are for the AI are pointing out that there's the whole issue of fair use, that we as artists should go out there and read all about fair use. And of course, one of the building blocks of the argument for the original models was that they were doing an educational research project, so that that would give them the reasoning to go out and scrape the web and take all of that and use it within their modeling machines, if you will. So there are, there's 2 arguments now going on, 2 lawsuits. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out.
Well, fair use is predicated upon non-commercial ventures. Fair use is considered reasonable when you're educating, of course, but also when you're not using it for commercial purposes. If you're a nonprofit and you're not making profit off of the information that you're using. So the fact that they had an educational objective to start with, so to speak, but now they're making big money, multi-billions off of these end products, that would more than nullify, I would think legally, any educational advantage they may have had in the fair use argument.
Another criteria for fair use is also commentary. So if it's critique, commentary, or irony, that is actually one of the criteria for fair use as well.
And I believe they surpass that by setting up multiple entities. So they have a research wing that's a nonprofit that has access to the images without copyright issues. And then that gets passed on to another entity through some sort of ungoverned arrangement that has a for-profit purpose. And I think our government is so far behind the understanding of what's going on that it's going to take years for the legal system to catch up to that.
That's the problem. The legal system, the people that are making these decisions in court, 2 different judges will make 2 different decisions just based on having no knowledge of fine art. And, that's what's going to make it really hard with AI is the proliferation of images and even a legal system that could handle the arguments.
Right.
But fair use is commentary percentage of the image in the work. Another criteria, oh, it just fell out of it. I've been in these lawsuits, so there's
Yeah.
one more criteria. It's oh, I know, transformation.
Yeah,
Is it transformative? So
yeah, Steve, I think that's a really, really big issue. And in fact, the link that I posted actually covers both transformative and derivative and what the difference is. And it looks like probably the AI companies are going to really heavily rely on transformative work versus derivative because of pretty much everything we've talked about, but also in the way that they see their engines working. And some of the lawyers that I have posted on about this on Zoom and other places, you know, they fall into their different camps, but I think the crux here is the work that AI does, is it transformative? Because I think that's going to be probably a really big deciding issue on where this may fall.
so what happened with Jeff Koons? There's two different, Jeff Koons took a postcard of a bunch of Swiss people on a bench with puppies, right? He took the postcard and he made a 3-dimensional painted wooden sculpture based on the image. I would argue that going from a postcard to a 3-dimensional sculpture, so at least 50% of the image is made up because you can't see the back of the postcard, right? You can't see the back of the image. So and he lost that case, the puppy case. He lost that, and to me, the photograph to a sculpture clearly is a demonstration of transformation. The other transformation argument that Richard was making was you're taking a digital image from a telephone and putting pigment on canvas. And, his argument, you're going from a digital image to a painting, and that the ink on canvas defines painting or pigment on canvas, and therefore it was transformative. So
what if someone takes a photograph of your painting and, takes that painting and transforms it to pixels, essentially digital art,
so the
what's
point is,
what's the difference?
it depends on what judge you get. That's the whole crazy thing about this. So Richard won his suit, Jeff lost his. And to me, it was clear that the from a postcard to a wooden sculpture was clearly transformative. So it's like, we can argue what's transformative, but doesn't matter. It's what the judge decides, who doesn't know a damn thing about art or derivative versus transformative.
I would argue that with Koons, that piece that he created was so little changed from the photograph. It looked exactly like the photograph, that it was, on face value, he had really not added anything other than to make it 3-dimensional. And
he made up 50% of that image.
He made it 3-dimensional, but he didn't really add anything to it. Whereas if you look at even Prince taking out the text and making it into something else, he had an idea there. I feel like Koons never had an idea. He just wants to use it as marketing, to go to court and get litigated. So he has, he gets more marketing buzz from it.
Well, again, this is what we get to, Lee. It's legal opinion. I am not the lawyer. He lost the case. Your argument is the one that won in court. My own feeling is a photograph to a wooden sculpture is transformation of that image. Yes, it's the same image, but to blow it up at huge scale, create 50% more that wasn't there, from my point of view, that would be transformative. Yes, did he rip off the other person's work and use that image? No question.
So
But Steve, I'm noticing just
you,
behind you too, the Duchamp bottle rack plays into what we're talking about right here, right? I mean, you know, the idea of what that's all about, you know, and you might want to
So,
mention it
yeah,
for the
I
people
mean,
who might not be familiar.
yeah, this is a bottle rack, and as many of you people may know in art history, Marcel Duchamp took a bottle rack and put it in a gallery and, you know, called it a sculpture. And so I just went to an antique store. I saw a bottle rack. I said, I now have a Duchamp. All I got to do is like put it, you know, put it into my world. I'm never going to be able to afford a Duchamp, so I just bought a bottle rack. It's a great point, Colin. And you know, talk about deep fake. This is the, you know, this is not a signed Duchamp bottle rack. I did not buy it from an art gallery with a certificate that said it was by Duchamp. But I love Duchamp's work. I recognize the value of the snow shovel, the bottle rack. I mean, this is really the start of this whole discussion. Yeah, so I guess I'm the owner of a deep fake.
Steve,
Thank.
so Steve, can you explain, because I know you know this, what Richard Prince did with the with Catcher in the Rye? Because he didn't really change that at all.
Yeah, I actually have one of those Catcher in the Rye books. He did absolutely nothing but to put his name on it, right? So he had the book. I mean, I'd have to go get it. It's on my
He made the
bookshelf.
books, right? Didn't he make them himself? But they're exact first editions, right?
Yes, he made a replica of the book and just put himself as the author, like I did with, you know, the Patrick Carrier, except I kept Patrick Carrier's name there to recognize that this was his work that I then appropriated. So I wasn't trying to obliterate. I don't know if he ever got sued for that. I don't know what the litigation was, if there was any litigation, but I happened to be at a book fair and I got wind because I knew some people that for, you know, for 20 minutes, he was going to pull out a bag of these Catcher in the Rye books. So I ran out there and I grabbed one, and then I actually got him to double sign it. So my copy is the original ones that he sold were not signed, but I know Richard, and I got him over to the studio. I got him to sign it. But yeah, it is a 100% appropriation, nothing different other than he changed the name. It's Richard Prince, Catcher in the Rye. And then, you know, this is the whole discussion about that goes into this AI discussion about authorship, ownership, you know, copyright, um, you know, your intellectual property. And the start of it is here, right? It's Duchamp, right? And no one was suing Duchamp for taking a bottle rack and hey, that's my bottle rack. You know, he just started this whole thing off. And then you have people like Cindy Sherman, Barbara Kruger, that then would appropriate or create images in the genre of something else to make statements about identity, class, and gender. And now we're at the point where we're at the, you know, the corporate level. And again, I'd like to go back to the point that we're all going to be, as producers of culture and content, we are going to look authentic. We're going to look like the shaman, the interpreter of culture in an authentic way that I think people will be interested in when this sort of mistrust of AI and authorship becomes like completely nebulous. Like, do you want the authentic, do you want to have a reminder of authenticity and originality? Or, you know, are you going to buy a whole collection? Is your collection of art, if you buy art, going to be all AI generated art? And that's what the NFT, right? We were arguing NFTs, you know, 3 years ago. Like, hey, that's not art. It's code on a blockchain. You know, and now we've just gone to this whole nother level. But we're at 7 o'clock, Colin. I just sorry I talked for so damn long. Please excuse me.
It's quite all right. You know, a pleasure to have you here at the salon. Tommy, you have something there? Pirate. What does it say?
Is this mirror image for everybody?
No, it's front facing.
Pirate Enlightenment something or other.
Pirate Enlightenment.
This is a recently published book. It was on on my mind when we were talking last. What was it last? 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about what to do this session. I just want to give everybody the name of the book and the name of the author, and give you the overview of the book, which is the idea that pirates in late 1600s, early 1700s were sort of a bastion of free thought, and had established places in Madagascar that passed on a lot of this sort of interesting, somewhat dubious stories of these tales of sexual liberation, sort of scandalous things in the sort of 1600s. You think about what was going on in Europe. These tales made it to Europe and might have been the instigation of the Enlightenment there. So that's the tall tale that this pirate, tells in this book. It's a book by an author who wrote, this. He wrote Bullshit Jobs, Don't Have Everything, Debt, and coined the term "We Are the 99%." It's a last book. So I'm really glad that we're talking about pirates in the way that we're thinking about, this sort of corporate negative. They are the pirates now that come and tax everything and make everything unaffordable in a way that sort of rapacious, the corporate buccaneers, if you will, in that sense. But there's also this other sense of pirate that I think is lost in that idea. And also we were talking about signifiers and icons, and this idea of the flag and the power of symbols, and the idea that a pirate can be this powerful symbol of what, but of freedom, actually, of breaking free from that colonialist past that they were spawned from, and spurned. So anyway, that's my long and short of having read only a quarter of the book so far. So don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. Thank you, Colin. I was waving the book.
Awesome.
around.
Thanks, Tommy. And thank you for suggesting this topic. When you first said pirates, I thought, well, that's obscure, like, I don't know how that's going to roll. And Renata added art pirates, and the whole session kind of like, it just, and that process of picking the topic in itself was sort of like an exquisite corpse moment of like, hey, like, how about this absurd thing? And like, it's really interesting. And I think, a lot of fun. So I do not want to go over. So, and we're coming right up to about 7:05, and we started at 5:35. So it is getting near the end point. But you're all welcome to hang out and engage in the community meeting, formerly known as the after party, and also referred to as group conscience in some contexts. So with that, Michael, do you have anything?
Yeah. Check out the latest roundtable. Thanks.
Oh yeah,
It's
I'm
up on
sorry
Zoom.
for not mentioning that. Let me just share my screen here and pull that up real quick. So Michael has been kind enough to develop this idea of the roundtable, which is somewhere in between our artist interviews and the salons. And the roundtables are basically small gatherings. The first one was one that I did and moderated between Christian Paul, who's the curator of digital art at the Whitney, and Helen Harrison, who is the director of the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center, and also our advisor for Techspressionism as a community. The newest one, Michael moderated with Roz Diamond, Renata Januszewska, and Tommy. And it's a great discussion on the topic of approach, which relates directly to the definition of Techspressionism, which is an artistic approach in which technology is utilized as a means to express emotional experience. And it was made clear to me that that was the topic. I had originally created an intro sequence where it said process, and Renata let me know, I mean, it was actually Roz let me know that it was really approach. And at first I was like, oh, I created this intro sequence, animated it, now I gotta re-edit it. But then I realized, you know what, like, that's a really important point. And it was a point that was brought up by Helen Harrison, that the original definition of Techspressionism was an artistic style in which technology is utilized as a means to express emotional experience. And if that stood, we wouldn't all be here today, because it would all look like my work, essentially. You know, I mean, I came up with this idea to describe my own work. And, you know, the goal is it's not work that all looks digital and computery, right? In fact, a lot of the work, you'd never know that technology was involved at all. Just like Franz Klein's famous black and white paintings in the 1950s were created with the aid of technology, in the sense that a Bell, I think it was a Bell Opticon opaque projector that he borrowed from Willem de Kooning was used to produce that work. And it was based on little charcoal sketches of furniture that he, you know, painstakingly rendered in oils. So when I heard that story for the first time, I was like, yo, that's technology too. That's, you know, a predecessor of where we are today. So anyway, it's my little diatribe here. And with that, I am going to close now, but again, you're all more than welcome to stick around, and first order is we will pick a topic for the next salon. So I thank you all for attending, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks. And we will stop recording at 3, 2, 1, and cut.